Okay, everybody. So at Douglas Finance Committee, we're coming to order at 7 on March 11, and let's just identify ourselves for the record. Let's start with Heather.
Heather Moore, Finance Committee.
Robert Leonardi, Finance Committee.
Lynn Mazzulli, Finance Committee.
Dick Vandenberg,
Michael Hudnar.
Carol Gogolinsky.
Sandy Kuipers.
and no Howard yet, but I think, and,
Howard Sawek.
oh, is he?
I thought so.
And Ryan told me he couldn't make it tonight, so, but we have our quorum. So, welcome, everybody. Our first agenda item is Board of Health. So if you guys would identify yourselves for the record.
Corey Howard, Board of Health member.
Kristen Harris, Board of Health Office Manager.
So one of you want to give us a little, just overview of how things are going, money-wise?
Things are going good. Are you talking health? We're talking just health now, or just transfer station separate?
What would you prefer to talk about first?
We can do health.
Okay, let's do that.
So I told Kristen that you guys were really looking for a background to what the departments did, their functions, and, you know, what their budget. The budget isn't yours. They weren't speaking to numbers, but more just their policies and procedures. On the transfer station, we'll get there a little bit later. We can explain that sheet. But so she has underneath her Board of Health, nurse, animal inspector, landfill maintenance, and monitor wells.
Sanitation.
And sanitation, and then transfer station separate.
So any of those, anything going on with any of those that we need to really be focused on, or are they kind of just carrying on year to year as far as?
Should we talk? That's an open-ended question.
Yes.
It is, yeah, but I mean, you know your department better than we do.
There is
so.
some landfill issues going on that we're working on. It's kind of just the beginning stages of it that we'll talk about.
Why don't we talk about that first?
You want to talk about that
Yeah.
first? So there's been a puddling at the landfill. So the cap's been on there since 1980s.
Right.
And, you know, there's been some, like, it's starting to sink a little bit, which is puddling water. So we're working on how to fix that. We're not really there yet as far as all the options.
Is this something that we just figure out ourselves, or is the state
No, we have
involved?
someone helping us.
I mean, but does the state?
The state will be involved, yeah.
Okay. And what's their role exactly?
They will permit us and, I guess, okay, we'll give them an idea of what we're planning on doing.
So the timeline will be, Kristen's working with a consultant right now. You'll probably see a small article on the annual town meeting, which will be for the engineering and design and permitting process, and that will help them come up with an estimate on how to rectify the situation, and that would probably be at the fall town meeting. I think it's too quick to address the picture now for either the special or annual. There's just not enough time for either him or for us. It's not going to be an inexpensive project, but he will lay out the options and the permits and work with DEP on that. So you'll probably see an article, again, for his time on the annual town meeting and
For this May, then?
for this May.
Okay.
But the project itself would probably not, you would not see until the fall.
Is the wording of that pretty straightforward, Gene, as far as you know, or that still have to be worked on a little bit?
He's going to, I asked him
He's gonna,
today,
yeah.
we had a brief call with him today, to work on some warrant language. It would be a special article.
Okay. And then if we're talking about the transfer station, how is it going with the number of permits that we're selling?
Good.
Is it steady with other years?
We're a little ahead of last year. I don't know if it's because we're cracking down a little bit more, saying you really got to get your sticker now. So people are really coming in. So we've seen, we're doing well. Yeah,
When I was there today, I only noticed one car that didn't have a new sticker.
yeah, good. And they probably came here afterwards, so.
And in terms of staffing for the transfer station, we have enough people and so on?
We do, we have we have 4 people and then like a extra fill-in person. So it works out well.
So what's the cost for the sticker this year?
It's $240 for 65 and over and $350.
So the big news with the transfer station is this capping issue and the pooling that we
With the
have.
landfill. Yeah, it's separate than the transfer station.
Oh, the landfill, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there will be a warrant article related to it, you think?
There definitely will be a warrant article in the annual town meeting, but that will be just for the design permitting part. And then the fall town meeting, you'll see because he has to come in, he has to educate the board, he has to meet with Board of Health, Board of Selectmen,
Yeah.
with the Finance Committee, to discuss what's happening and the options and how to proceed. I did remind him that anything he does is going against the purchase of his truck. Same code. But
They won't let them just put more dirt there to mound it up?
It's kind of one of the options, I believe, he mentioned is taking some topsoil off, putting some new soil on, and then putting the topsoil back on. We need to make it, fill it up. But it's a big piece of land, so
you got to be careful not to destroy
you
what's
can't touch,
currently there.
yeah, they can't touch the
Piece of
cap.
it, right.
So,
Okay, any other questions on that? Anybody in terms of what we can expect for the warrant? All right, you want to talk about the town nurse? How's that going?
good, she's good. She's really helping a lot, or taking charge of like emergency preparedness. She's got a big hand in that. She goes to she does all the Maven, so any diseases that come into town. She does a lot of residents call and need blood pressure checks or things like that. She's very involved with our regional towns. It's going really well.
So I know a year or two ago, Sandy, you had a concern about the number of hours that the nurse we were budgeted for her and so on, and was she using that time well and so on? What's your sense now of
She's,
how many hours the nurse we budget for her, and is it an adequate amount? Should we do more? Could we do less?
I think it's perfect right now.
Do you?
Yep, I do. She seems to have no issues trying to go over her hours or anything, but she does do a lot. But it's good. She was working a little bit less hours, and now she's increased to what we budgeted her for.
Okay.
She's working more towards that.
So one question we're asking all the departments is, as you've been working with the town administrator on the budget, with the limitations that we have, the roughly 2.5%, 2%, 3%, was there any particular thing that was challenging for you to make out your budget for next year, given the limits that all the town departments have?
I just started looking at, I got the budget this afternoon, so I just started looking at it. For like the help, it seems okay for me.
Okay.
I had to increase just a little bit of things, that prices had increased for me, but
Anything you'd like us as a finance committee to be particularly aware of all the things that are under your authority, so to speak?
the biggest thing right now is the landfill.
Okay.
But that's pretty major.
Okay. Any questions, anybody, for
Are you
Board of
getting a
Health?
lot of applications for septic systems?
It's been really busy.
It has?
Yeah. That's never slowed down. It doesn't slow down in the winter either.
Yep.
It's just very, very busy.
In terms of the nurse, what other towns do we offer services to? Talk about
She's just
regional.
Douglas. We have a regional, Blackstone Valley Partnership, oh my gosh, Public Health, there's 8 towns altogether. And we share inspectors. She's only our nurse, but we work closely with them on lots of things. It's a grant that we get. So we have like granted inspectors, and we have a nurse as well that works in the region. So if Agnieszka's out, she'll cover, or if there's something going on and we need help, she'll cover or help out. There are food inspectors, health inspectors, and they come every week. We're short one person right now, so we have one person every other week that comes into the office if there's a housing complaint or a food complaint, he's right there on top of it. So
The nurse wouldn't be involved with food inspections.
she's
already?
starting to learn.
She is?
Yes, she wants to be like a food inspector. So she's taking classes right now, which they offer free through the state. So she's been doing a lot of that, and she's been going out on some of the inspections with the inspectors. And eventually, like even move into health, like the housing.
How do you get the word out on, like blood pressure checks? You mentioned that. I had no idea that was a service that we offered. Like, is that something that we communicate with people through like council on aging or?
So
other
Patrice would
offices?
know, Patrice should know, but they do it at the senior center too, so
Yeah.
I thought most people go there, but there's a couple of people that just know Agnieszka's number that will call her. Word of mouth, I guess, I mean, it's on the website, I don't know how many people will look at that, but I believe she has it on her page as well.
Is she the one who does the blood pressure at the senior center, or is
No.
it someone else?
No, they have somebody else,
Someone else.
yeah. I'm not sure who they use, yeah. But she's available always, yeah,
Yeah,
she's.
might be an opportunity for some cost savings with it.
How's it going with grants? This is something we ask all the departments to. Everybody has some grants that come in. Are those pretty steady year after year, or is it?
The grant I work mostly with is for transfer station,
Okay.
recycling and so forth.
Yeah.
That's when I usually work on. The grant that I'm talking about, actually, Northbridge is kind of the hub of that, so they're the ones that do all the grant work of it and do all the paying salaries and all that out of the grant.
I've been watching the select board, and they were talking about a regional animal control
Animal
person.
and animal inspector, because we
Yeah.
have regional animal control now. So I think, because I wasn't here then at that meeting, but the fire chief from Uxbridge mentioned
Police
it.
chief.
With the police chief?
Police chief.
Because they have the regional animal inspector through them, that it might be a good idea to have the regional health animal.
Right.
They have the control officer and have the animal inspector as well. I haven't heard too much about that, but
Currently, that individual, he works for both.
we have someone now that works for Uxbridge and Douglas as our animal inspector.
Can I ask what an animal inspector does?
So he does barn inspections once a year. Any rabies calls, any quarantine dogs, even if a cat gets bit, comes home, people will get something from either the vet, or if someone gets bit by a dog, we'll get something from a hospital, and he'll call and quarantine the animals. If a bat's in your house, he'll go get it, and he'll bring it and have it checked for rabies. And so he handles rabies, quarantines, barns.
Matt, is
Complaints.
animal control different than animal inspection?
Yep.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, got it. Is there a lot of that that goes on in our town,
Yes.
animal inspection?
There's a lot, there can be. We have our moments.
But historically, is that something that,
For complaints, animal complaints, or,
whatever animal inspection involves? is that-
Generally, so I was animal inspector for a good while, about 10 years ago. And yes, it's sort of like the ocean, up and down.
Okay,
You know, sometimes there'll be a lot of things that you get called about, and there'll be a month where you don't really see any at all. And then typically the fall during the barn inspections, there's a lot of driving around and a lot of, checking out the farm animals and just making
Okay.
sure everybody looks healthy. Bats and those type of rabies calls, when I was on, there was a handful a year. I believe our current animal inspector does the driving out to Jamaica Plains, the testing facility himself. When I was doing it, we had a runner even for that. But now I think he's taken all that sort of on his shoulders, and he's doing all those things as well. So it can get pretty busy.
okay,
Can
thank
get
you.
pretty busy.
I noticed that a lot of people have chickens. Do you have to go out and inspect them too?
When I was animal inspector, if I knew they were there, I would go through and I would take a look.
So in terms of the budget for next year, you're content with the amount of money you have to work with in terms of what you need to do for next year? Is that
yeah. but-
fair?
Give or take, yeah, a little bit, yep.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Board of Health, anybody? All right, thanks for coming,
Thank you.
guys,
Thank you
appreciate it.
Thank you very
Very
much.
much.
Have a wonderful night.
You too.
Valley Tech, gentlemen. So Dr. Fitzpatrick, this will be our last time to see you, huh?
Yes, unless I come as a visitor.
Yeah. Or an apparition, right?
Wow.
Well, I hadn't thought of that option.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So we have information from Valley Tech before you. Well, can you introduce yourself for the group?
Sure, happy to. I'm Anthony Steele. I'm currently your assistant superintendent principal. Been at Valley Tech for about 28 years and have been appointed as Dr. Fitzpatrick's replacement. So
Oh, that's great.
thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Honored to serve.
So are you a Anthony or a Tony?
I'm a both. It depends on where I am. and-
What mood everybody?
Yeah, you got it. But I respond to both.
All right. So Anthony, are you going to walk us through the list here a
I'm
little
going to
bit?
start off by just passing some things out. I think Dr. Fitzpatrick will lead off, and
Okay.
we usually chime in together, so that works for the committee.
First of all, having served as your superintendent for 32 years at the Vocational Technical School, thank you for your professionalism over the years. We have 126 Finance Committee members, but I have to say that whenever the presentations and the conversations, deliberations, inquiries have occurred at this table or with the various board, it's always been professional. So thank you for that. In advance of this meeting, as you mentioned, we sent up advanced copies of the budget, the preliminary budget, because it has not yet been approved, okay? The budget is, throughout the state, is at a bit of a disadvantage at this point, and the only numbers out there are the governor's numbers. The governor has, anticipated certain federal decisions, which I doubt that she would be comfortable confirming at this point. Also, the governor's plan relies upon her preferred utilization of the so-called millionaire's tax, right? So the state legislature, neither the House or the Senate have met or finalized their budget. So those are unknowns. In the governor's budget, to the disappointment of most educators and certainly most city and town managers, the state of Massachusetts, in the governor's plan, appropriated only $75 per student. And that's not going to cover much of the actual expenses. And so that's not even $104 per student of last year. In addition, all of the workshops, the Zoom presentations and other webinars that we participated in gave further evidence that the state was making adjustments because 235 school systems in the state have, such as yours, have a declining enrollment. And so they're not ignoring the enrollment factor, but it's not driving the dollars to the extent it did in certain aspects of the budget. Okay, we've sent, and I'm sure you have monitored the information that's come from the state, and you can see that although there is a reduction of one student, you had 126 students a year ago when I presented, and in October of this previous cycle, you had 125. So you've maintained a 9.94, so basically a 10% ownership in your vocational technical school. And the state took a look at the community's 2022 property values and 2021 income values and other considerations and arrived at a fairly healthy absolute minimum contribution, which you would have seen in the state printouts when we saw them on the state printouts. Basically increasing the expected request in that component alone by $120,000. So, when you have a declining enrollment, even though it's a change of one, you would have anticipated that wouldn't have seen that kind of increase. But as I say, that the state was less than apologetic about reducing the manner in which it was considering enrollments. Across the 13 towns, we have 4 member communities of your 13-town partnership that will have a reduced assessment, somewhat driven by reduced enrollment, but probably even more significantly by the state's scenario that played out. The budget book is printed by our students, and I'll walk through that if we may. The budget subcommittee met roughly 10 times in public posted session, making reports to the monthly school committee meeting as well, so that would be additional presentations. Each of those gatherings were publicly posted with minutes, and it's not uncommon that we have oftentimes even college graduate students come in to watch that process. We've traditionally received multiple inquiries from our colleagues relative to certain ways in which we do things, and we're honored to do that. We don't have all the answers, but it's not uncommon that we're asked by others for helpful hints. Unlike many of my colleagues, they don't always serve for 32 years, so there's significant transition. The budget subcommittee is listed on the inside page here. It's a cross-representation of school committee individuals, the business manager, who's fairly new in her own, but certainly capable, the treasurer, which is an independent person who works in a check and balance form with the school committee, and administrators who make presentations. Mr. Steele and myself were present at all of the budget meetings, and I have to say the budget meetings are lively activities. In the same manner that you've conducted your business or observed, when an individual comes in, curriculum person, special ed person, or athletic director, anybody, they're grilled. They're asked to defend what their request is, to indicate why they need it, could they live without it, have they found other ways to acquire it. And so that's well documented in the minutes. When you think of the previous year, there's a few, reference points I'd like to put out. Once again, we have no legal entanglements. There's no current legal, unless something happened today.
Nope, it was a good day.
Before us. And so we're delighted to have that scenario. Means we didn't have to take money away from education or away from students and direct it to legal costs. There were no grievances by the teachers, once again. And so we strive hard and have been particularly successful in resolving any issue or difference without having it. The state has examined our special education services and sent us a glowing report, which is available if you'd like to see it, we can get it to you. It said they had no issues whatsoever, although they have lots of issues with many school systems, okay? And this is an ongoing issue and a complication. We've had none of those issues. We're blessed with staff that have longevity, okay? Not necessarily 32 years, but Mr. Steele's been with us for, 25? 28 years. And that's pretty common. Not necessarily 28 per se, but I mean, long-term service of our people. And we're pleased to see that because and if a person doesn't want to be with us, that's okay too. We do have some changes, but usually they're people who couldn't adapt to the expectations of our operation. Some overview. The next page is the green sheet, which is the revenue sheet. The revenue sheet is rather dim. Okay, and this is what's put additional pressure on the entire process. As I've already made reference to the Chapter 70, we expect the legislature to enhance Chapter 70, but not by a great deal, right? And so the Chapter 71, Douglas enjoys regional transportation reimbursement because it has a partnership with 12 other communities, and that allows us to have regional. We have projected regional transportation at 80%. We think that's a reasonable projection. We certainly hope it's higher, okay? In the past, when the regional transportation has been higher than projected, a so-called windfall, if you would, then what the district does is it puts that extra money in a revolving account, or actually it's a stabilization account, that is limited to the use of transportation, and it must be used in the very next year. And we've done that. A year ago, you may recall, we had a healthy contribution from the 2 years ago, the final number of regional transportation, and we're able to use that as an offset of the budget. We did not experience that in the last cycle, so we don't have that to the same level. We continue to assess fees for the use of our facility within reason. Also, we're We take pride in being a community service activity. The investment income is up substantially in that the treasurer was far more successful in investing the money on our behalf and continues to do that. I had a conversation in response to a question. Somebody asked, could I summarize what we do and simplify it for someone? And I'll try that. I would say that for $1 that we're given, we ask the treasurer to invest it, earning at least 5% in low-risk types investment. So the dollar becomes $1.05. Then we chase down grants, which have been in the magnitude of $3 million a year, and you'll see a delineation. This is not smoke and mirror. These are actually confirmed grants or others that are still under consideration. So if that's worth 10 cents on a dollar, your dollar is now $1.15. Right? And then what we've done is we've regularly used that, as we did in the roof project that was just approved, although there's no debt on that for FY26, to get 50% back. So let's say that's 50 cents, even though it's $1.15. Okay, so now your dollar's worth $1.65. But we don't even stop there. We take the $1.65, and then we use that and offer it as a match to secure additional money from the state. More recently, we've received $4 for $1 that we put up. So what we've tried to do is take the dollar and stretch it as far as we can, because we know that's a particularly valuable. Our total budget, and I'm working my way to that number on the bottom corner here on the document you received in advance, is 5.7%. Inflation is 7 or 8%. So moving through this, the District School Committee is once again attempting to show good faith from its reserve fund, otherwise known as excess and deficiency, or abbreviated as E&D, common thought of as a free cash type equivalent for a community. They're willing to draw into that account an amount of $250,000, okay, to help offset the cost. And then we also, in 2015, and I've made reference to this before, we received a bill from the state for non-teacher support staff, non-professional staff, pension billing. And so they were giving us a bill because of a change of the treasurer for 2013 and 2014. We refused to pay that. The bill was not timely. There was no pre-knowledge, there was no indication of that. No one went without their pension. And you can't send us a bill because you've discovered it 2 years later that you should have billed us 2 years before. And so 2015 money was not a good use of a bill that the state found that went back to 2013. So we challenged it. And the state acknowledged that, well, not everybody, of course, but I'm just saying that, acknowledged that it was their error. And so we continued to file special legislation to offer testimony, including speaking at the State House, as well as sending in testimony to continue to contest this. And we wanted amnesty of it. We just wanted to forgive it, okay? We continued to pay the bill, which we knew about from 2015, 16, 17 to the current day. And it's a sizable bill, but in any case. So the auditor, an independent audit, which is included in our budget, okay, and again, included this year, has confirmed that with that period of time elapsing, that we were on safe grounds between the special legislation filed and that that's no longer a bill that needed to be recognized. Now, what the auditor did from 2015 to the time, which the first time the bill appeared, to last year, was continue to make us aware of a lien, okay? So that be prepared to pay it in case you have to pay it. The total bill was $400,000, by the way, okay? $200,000 for 13, $200,000 for 2014. And so, but now that we're in a position that it can be forgiven, you paid that bill. We tucked it away in case we had to pay it, and we were able to negotiate an arrangement where it won't be paid, so we want to give it back. and give it back in 2 installments, okay? $200,000 in FY '26 and probably $200,000, although it's premature for me to speak because I'll be retired, but as far as 27. All right, so that's an additional and rather unique source of that money, and we think it's the right way to do business, and we're pleased that the auditor supported our plan on that. So that concludes the revenue, and you can see the state Chapter 70 here is less than 2%, okay? So it's, puts the burden on assessments, and that's exactly where we find ourselves with Douglas and with the other towns, okay? The other sections of the budget walk through the line item summaries, cost by cost, for a total of 5.7. Let me comment on some of the costs that built into the budget. The teachers in FY '26 are in the third year of the previously negotiated collective bargaining agreement. The base raise was 3%. Okay? The bus contract is in the fourth year in FY '26 of its contract at 7% increase. I have to say 7% for student transportation can be alarming, but we know from our conversation with colleagues that it's substantially less than what some of the bus companies are charging in other settings. In some of the regional school systems, it's 2 and 3 times that cost. I want to give credit to the professional relationship we've established with the bus company, which happens to be Vendetti out of Franklin, and they've been particularly, helpful, reasonable, and good business people. That's an overview. On the back side of the green sheet is, once again, the school committee is making advance requests to utilize up to 700, right?
Yes.
$700,000 in excess and deficiency to continue to complete projects that have been funded or otherwise handle emergencies and not go back to the towns to fund that. The Department of Revenue certified our excess and deficiency and notified all towns of that at just under 1.5 million. So that's where that sits. That's been a previous question. If we move to the assessment sheet, or to the pink sheet, actually, you find that, as previously mentioned, Douglas has 125 students, basically 10% of the operation. The minimum contribution, which we inherit and you inherit from the state, is listed, and then the transportation is a separate category, not included in additional, and then the additional assessment is what we need to pay all the bills. We've pointed out that since we have no municipality to pass the bill on, that we have to cover all expenses. And so that's how we arrive at the total assessment that's been advanced to you. Let me point out that under the FY '26 plan includes a plan we're currently negotiating with the state of Massachusetts to offer, I think, five vocational technical programs for adults at no cost to the adults. And those programs are welding, advanced manufacturing, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC. Is that correct? Correct. Right. And so that has been a request of citizens across our district. This is a much more advanced and elaborate training program than the so-called $5 a night, practical arts type program. And so we're able to apply to the Commonwealth under a program they call CTI, but to recognizing the shortage of tradespeople, and the state is willing to fund that, and we have an application before them. Last I knew, they had yet to act on it, but the preliminary reactions were favorable. Okay, so that's another activity and a return of the money being asked for FY '26. The next page is a clear indication that although the Mass School Building Project, which so-called accelerated repair, is our 5th accelerated repair project in the more recent years, and this one was approved by all 13 towns, and 6 towns took action, as did you, for debt exemptions. Okay. In the other 5, the vote wasn't quite as close as it was in Douglas, but nevertheless, a yes vote is a yes vote. We'll take that. Okay. When the Mass School Building Authority indicated to us just a few weeks ago that we didn't have to plunge into borrowing, first of all, you don't do all your borrowing at once. You do stagnate it, or phase it based on what's needed. That we didn't have to do that. It wouldn't slow down the momentum of our project and as it moves through the Mass School Building Authority. And that we didn't have to borrow, and so this school committee decided they wouldn't borrow until we need to. The state has yet to identify a percentage of reimbursement, but they're getting closer, okay? And so we have pointed out in the previous borrowing, we received 53% reimbursement, so we hope it's of that magnitude. What we have seen is, I know that there were some questions raised about the borrowing rate, okay, and some concern about the unpredictability of a number of indicators nationally. We've seen the borrowing rate go down, and so it's more attractive than it would have been previously. So to make sure there's no confusion on this, included this blue sheet that said there's no borrowing, or if there is any, and if there's any short-term cost, the school district it plans to address it within its excess and deficiency and not pass it on to the towns. The planning that's underway now includes designees that have been hired and appointed by the Mass School Building Authority, who have been in and out of our building, including today. They're in and out regularly now. We know them, they know us. An architect has been identified who will coordinate the roof project, and he was in doing what I'll call some sample cuttings, okay, analysis. He continued to confirm that our project was, had no issues that would disrupt it. And indicated that with so many roof projects across the state, it would be best to move as quickly as possible. Well, we'll do that, but we'll do it in sync with the state. I think you know that we waited until the state reopened the accelerated repair before we pursued this across the 13 towns. We do know that some communities, even in our district, decided to self-fund roof projects, in some cases at $5 million or greater, without reimbursement. We've been so fruitful, it's been so fruitful, so beneficial to meet the MSBA rules and to live within them in the filing reports and then receive the reimbursement that we try hard to go to that well as often as possible. The next sheet is a summary of the total line item budgets, and then the next few pages walk you through each of the sections. The two increases that are the so-called driving forces for the FY26 budget include the pension cost and the health benefits of those and pensions. So don't think I made reference to my cover letter in detail. Let me just, why? Because it's not in this one. Okay. There you go. Okay. Here you go. In the cover letter, which should be in your copy, even though it's not in this one, okay, is an attempt to provide a summary of the request and what's driving it. It takes credit for the fact that we've been so successful with grants that we can mathematically match the fact that we have $2,400 for every student enrolled in grants alone. What the grants do is they allow us to cover costs that otherwise we'd have to pass on to the towns and allow us to address other issues. The rules for so-called supplanting are somewhat more flexible than they used to be with the way the federal government looks at these things and where the audits take place. Our audit, by the way, is also on file, independent audit, and it raised no issues whatsoever, which is a credit to the new business manager, the treasurer, and the entire operation, I guess.
Mike, one thing we've been asking everybody is the grant picture pretty predictable, like for next year? Can you count on past grants coming in again? Is that pretty steady as she goes or not?
It's probably more unpredictable than ever.
Okay.
Okay, in the sense of if we have relied upon independent agency grants okay, which will be less impacted by federal government and by state grants, and no indication that the state wouldn't continue to have the money in those coffers to address our request. However, when you get to the Title I grants, what they call elementary and secondary education grants, and a few others that oftentimes are used for reading programs and special education programs, there's also other categories called Public Law 89-313, and some of those are feds. Another one is the Perkins Grant that usually goes to VOC schools. Those are, we're watching them closely. Those have not, since we're not a city, we haven't been the beneficiary of huge Title I grants, no more than we were not included in stimulus money, okay, to a significant part. So it's funny, when you're left out and then they take it away, you didn't miss it because you never got it. Okay, but I'm sorry that's a long-winded answer, but I'm saying that we continue to strive to secure grants that we'll continue to produce. We're expanding the number of applications we're making, and we're watching closely what changes will take place.
Okay.
But we have not been dependent on a particular grant, on a particular source from the federal government that's known to be at risk at this point. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
appreciate that.
I've already mentioned the Do It adult programs, although subsequent to my letter, which was written some time ago, the state has agreed to do the advanced manufacturing and welding in addition to the programs that are listed here. I've already made reference to the remaining aspects of the letter, which talk about self-funding or contributions against assessments. In addition to the materials, you will find a delineation of a step-by-step process of how our budget is acted upon. Our public hearing is the 13th, so it's Thursday.
Are you going, Rob?
Yes.
You had
Pardon?
talked about that.
Yeah, okay. So we will have a public hearing on school choice and a public hearing on the budget, followed by a full school committee meeting, same night, okay? So they will act on this budget. Even though the budget before you is a preliminary budget, we certainly do not expect any increase in the request of what's in here. Frankly, I apologize for the request that's in there now, all right, in the sense of, the town owns 10% of a 5.7% budgetary increase to cover all costs, and we wish it were greater subsidized by the state, not to put blame, but I'm saying that this just, it puts the burden on assessments to cover the bills.
I think one question we often get from our fellow citizens is, how do you justify an increase for our own local school that's a lesser percentage than for Valley Tech? And
Yeah.
I know you have kind of a standard answer to that.
Yeah, well, the point is, the request of the local schools doesn't, the town pays a lot of the bills of the local schools, in summary, and all across the cities and towns of the state of Massachusetts. Not so much the 4 that are underground in the Quabbin Reservoir, but the other 351, all right? And no town pays our bill. We pay, in that regard. We can't hand it off even to our host town of Upton. And so what we point out is that while we wish the local schools the very best of luck, that they have the luxury of asking the town to pay a number of bills on their behalf, okay? And I would do that if I were a local superintendent as well, all right? So and so it's not a fair comparison unless you extract all the other bills, the unemployment, the workman's compensation, health benefits. Health benefits are 4% increase, by the way, right? So for us, that's another budgetary factor that's built in.
Do you have any differences in your health plan this year, same deductible?
We were able to expand the coverages but lower the premium.
There's a question on that. You said health was 4%. When I'm looking at fixed charges, which is predominantly your health insurance, is going up 10%. So So I was just kind of curious, what's driving the rest of the increase in fixed charges? When I look at the individual breakdown, and I compare that back to the green sheet shows a 10% increase, and you just said the health insurance was only going up 4%?
You want to comment on that?
I think we're looking at the difference between 4% for our regular employees, however, other employees, it was
Yeah,
13.25.
let me make that distinction. Sure, okay. So that's, the active employees are 4%. Retired employees, we're at the mercy of whatever the state comes up. The state is indicating in the group insurance costs that cover for retirees, we built in a 13% increase to cover that. They said the increase may be 19%.
So what are you waiting on yet, Mike?
Well, we don't
State-wise?
have a bill from the state for that.
Okay.
Okay, right. So, as you know, that oftentimes you have to forecast and predict what certain bills will be.
Yeah.
So the entire line is not covered by simply the active cost, active employee health other expenses.
It's both.
It's a great question, yes.
Active and retiree, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. There's a listing of the grants, and in a small way of giving back, you'll see that we had a request from the school department, another indication, I guess, of how we wish them well. They wanted a mailing system, internal, and so they asked our construction technology to make that mailbox, which is, probably doesn't capture the dimensions, but so that was made by our students and is completed, delivered yet, but last time I saw it was in the shop.
That photo was probably yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
So it's-
So I guess they're waiting for it to dry. But in any case, and so that's something where the cost was just for the materials, because our school's owned by 13 towns. Okay, so this is a way of, regularly helping towns. And there are different requests. The town of Millbury and Millville had, what's that?
Is this done in Mark's shop?
Yes, that's correct. Both Millbury and Millville sent over police cruisers that needed work, and, mostly painting and decorating, decaling type things. And so those are in the works too. So we regularly do projects like this and are proud to do that, help the towns in some small way, and have it be safe and additional learning for students, and also a certain pride of giving back to their communities. At this point, Anthony and I have presented to two towns at their request. A public hearing in Mendon included both the Board of Select Persons and the Finance Committee, and a public hearing in Millbury, again, involving the select persons, the town managers as well. There's a brand-new town administrator in the town of Mendon, and so we certainly wish him well, following in Matt's, experienced footsteps. And those are I would just say that we don't normally ask or receive a vote, no more than we ask technically a vote of you at this point, because you're analyzing all kinds of factors. And hopefully the picture improves between now and the time in which we have other town finance committees, and it might be public hearings, or at least finance committees that are scheduled, and that's all part of what we do. Another difference of a local, we go to 13 different finance committee presentations and ask, defend, explain, and ask.
What are some of the timeframes you're waiting on to hear from the state for things? Are we talking a week or two, or a month, or up until the day before our town meeting in May, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, the current projection is approximately April 17th. The House of Representatives in Massachusetts would take action. And following that, the Senate, and then, of course, the two sides have to come to terms.
Yep.
So we won't see a House number, you won't see that, relative to hopefully improving, at least state financing. And maybe clarifying some other questions until April 17th.
And then-
We monitor them closely, but we're at the mercy of them. Does that answer that?
Yeah, and then another thing we often ask, as people are before us, is as you look down the road, 3 years, 5 years, and so on, and one thing I've picked up from just reading the news is that the state is really is thinking a lot about how to expand the enrollment at all the voc tech schools, just across the state, because the demand is so high for kids to get in.
Yes.
How does that work exactly? I mean, is it sort of a region by region? Is the state going to come up with the vanilla one-size-fits-all? What's the vibe you're getting as you talk to other tech schools about this pressure to expand availability?
The pressure and the inclination or the need are real, as you point out. Our observation is at least 6 regional voc tech schools have recently asked their district to fund and support $300 million or more of new expansion, right? So a healthy request.
And the state has talked about funding some of that too, as I recall.
Yeah, what the state is toying with is instead of, when Douglas entered into the $36 million expansion 22 years ago, the state reimbursed us and you at 75.5%. All right, and they have, more recently, they've reduced that reimbursement for new construction. Now they're looking at incentives because of vocational need that they may enhance it to make it more attractive. But it's still at the mercy of the district voters and the communities adopting a willingness to accept new debt, okay, and a significant magnitude. We've frankly chosen, at least for 32 years, to do it differently. Recognizing that our communities first of all, they're rural. Oftentimes they don't benefit from significant commercial income. Milford might be a rare exception, all right? That the towns and they, I guess, they live within their means, let's say, all right? And so that they're less likely to support a $300 or $350 million new vocational technical school. The interest in coming to our school is at least double the number of students who come into it, right? And so even if the incentive was greater, it has been, I would say, my recommendation, if not my decision, not to advance another major expansion that would create a new facility. Now, some people kid us. I'm saying when you come and tour, and some of you have, we're glad to have you do that, you'll see a 65-year-old facility in the older section, a little less in other sections, but we're renovating it every day, all day, including today. And that we value what we've been given and we take care of it. So while we have not plunged into a request for a new facility, we continue to expand, for example, the adult programs that will be added next year, if the state supports us on that, and they're inclined to do that, that we continue to provide a safe education, fix the roof, fix all aspects of it, even in those, either self-funding them or connecting to accelerated repairs, getting reimbursement, and I wouldn't say it's a duct tape approach, but just to continue to make the best of what the towns are able to give us, and not get ahead of ourselves. All right. On the other hand, there will be a time, okay, that you will have to give strong thought to creating a newer structure, okay, at some point. If the state makes it more and more worthwhile, that might make the decision easier, but it's a decision that has to be acted favorably by all 13 partners, unless you change the agreement. All right? So I hope that helps respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any questions, anybody, for Anthony or Michael?
I have one. It's more curiosity than anything. Going through the budget numbers there, one thing that kind of stood out to me and struck me as slightly odd, to be honest, and maybe it's just my misunderstanding. The term of school choice, it's a minor expense in your numbers here. But to me is, you know, I'm just thinking conceptually. Students apply for admission into BVT, they get accepted, they attend there, and then yet you still have some students that decide to choice out to other regions? Or is that like they decide to go back to their sending town?
Go ahead. I'll add to this. I'll give the kid a shot.
So there's very few exceptions to these. I think this year we have 4 represented. There are students that we probably have never met, never knew. If a student finds a program in another vocational school that we don't offer, they're able to choice to that program. Valley Tech becomes a pass-through for the funds.
Understood.
And so we're basically culpable for 5,000. And so that's where that becomes an entry, line entry for us. But it's basically a student that, they let us know the town
Yeah.
and the school they went to.
So maybe you offer welding, but not underwater welding, and
And they say, I'm going to Tri-County to take underwater welding.
Sure.
We get the bill. That's
Yeah.
about our extent of our participation in it.
makes sense.
Yeah, just, it's a great question, Mike. These are students that we never had, okay, never met. It's my understanding that there are 4 in total.
think it's 4 this year.
And they're all in Worcester. Okay, so they live in the district, never came to Valley Tech, and opted to go to Worcester, and the state is recognizing it as a Chapter 74 placement. So we inherit them.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Any changes in staff, teachers?
There's a pretty level transition. There's not, there's like a .4 change in FTEs.
Nice.
Future, you know, and so there's really some shifting, shifting to be able to do this adult program and also special needs, but no major additions of students because the overall enrollment is not much of a change.
And is your nurse leaving, I heard?
The nursing continues, the program.
No.
No, our school nurse.
The school nurse.
She's retiring.
Oh, yes. that's-
You just have one school nurse?
We have 2.
2.
And so
You will,
Kathy Pichel's retiring.
you'll fill her position?
We will fill her position.
Okay. Are you taking how are you,
We're just getting it posted now. If you know somebody that's interested, please send them over.
No, I just signed the posting.
she actually went?
Boy, you're following things awfully close.
Yeah, I think the posting went up yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I found out, or how this person found
Yeah.
out, but, you know.
Well, we're delighted to have candidates. Okay. And also, there's sometimes teaching opportunities in the after-hour nursing program. Yeah.
All right, anybody else?
I went by the other day and I noticed that are they building an ADU in the back, or is that just, it's like a little house is going on back there?
yeah.
Yeah. That's maximizing our campus, okay? And that's an additional learning lab for the construction technology and the other vocational technical programs. They built it as a simulator,
Yep.
okay? And then you'll use it, punch holes in it, do everything else, knock it down and build it again.
Oh, okay.
And so it's just expanding the laboratory, once again.
Yeah, well, it's a collaborative effort between the construction trades.
Right.
So construction technology built the structure. I think they intentionally use some different methods of construction within it. Plumbing will come out and plumb it.
Yeah.
Electrical will put the electrical service in it. They'll also, working with solar voltaics and things like that. Plumbing, if you get up close to it, has a plumbing pit there, which is a sand pit, where they're also doing all the drainage associated with it. And who did I leave out? HVAC. HVAC will come in and put some systems in. So it's a live simulation, if you will, but it's also an opportunity for them to collaborate, to make sure the plumbers aren't, coring holes through the electrician's wires and things like that.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that happen. I've seen the fist fights that's in
There you go. We're trying to avoid that,
After 'em.
Carol.
Carol, it also has the advantage of no lost time for transportation.
Right.
So it's right there.
Right.
Yeah. Our students also printed the 31st or 32nd, I guess, annual report, kind of a return on investment, and those were sent up earlier. I'll leave a couple of copies for just as samples.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One other question I had too, You mentioned before some of the comparisons, Dick, you brought it up of, our school district increases X amount. This is a different increase, and we talked about some of the differences, right? There's benefit costs that show up in your numbers, but not necessarily in the school, and the Douglas school budget numbers and
Yeah.
things like that. What about like school resource officers, security, work, where we might be able to lean on or borrow services from our local police force? I'm assuming you have to contract that out or hire that out, and
That's just- it's-
so another difference to kind of outline to.
That's correct. There, in fact, is an inventory of some of the costs that are in our budget that you would not traditionally find in a town's budget. But you cite another example.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a memorandum of agreement with the Upton Police Department for that, and so, and we pay for it. Okay, and we've benefited from good services. And the previous SORs have come back, in some cases, security people for it. So,
Yeah.
once they know us, they know our hallways and actually our whole process, then it allows. We've benefited from no major injuries, okay, and a safe environment. But you're right, that's another example. Yeah.
And just, not a question for them per se, but I think just a general comment, we've heard some discussions about, and Dr. Fitzpatrick, you brought it up again tonight, of the increase, so our percentage of students is just under 10%. It's that 9.44%. That's in the green sheet, or maybe it was the pink sheet, I think. But then when you look at the cost, right, the total cost that we're sending over on that sheet, it shows that it's a little over 10%. And I just did some quick math here on the calculator, because at first, I think that's one thing that when that concept kind of goes out of, well, the state shifted the funding model, and it's not just your 9.5% that you get charged of the total school expenditures. Initially, some warnings or, some sensitivities could come up amongst people and saying, am I paying more than my fair share, right? Am I subsidizing another town because of our town's revenue income or our town's property tax valuation? When you do the quick math on it, though, there's a $59,000 difference between if you look at our 9.5% versus that a little over 10% charge. If you, again, kind of rationalize that down, what's the cost to the individual taxpayer? It's less than $100 per taxpayer. So I think when you look at it that perspective, it's not that we're getting stuck with a big portion of the bill, right? It's not like we're all going out to dinner together and Douglas is getting 80% of the bill unjustly. It's a smaller portion. So I think when we state that, when we have some of these meetings or some of these open sessions and townspeople might be asking us questions, I think it's important to kind of put it in that box of, it's not an extra $250,000 that Douglas is footing the bill for. It's an extra $59,000 that, when you look at those two scales of enrollment percentage versus cost percentage, it's not far off the mark, in my opinion. So it's nothing to get kind of too riled up about.
Well, thanks for sharing. I think that's a fair mathematical perspective. We strive hard not to have one town competing with the other 12. Okay, and we get some of that, to say the least. Douglas pays the 7th lowest, per student of the 13. Okay, so that means that 6 pay less per student for that type of analysis, and the job of the superintendent of regional system has been much more difficult every time the state reduces its subsidy and transfers the burden to the towns. Okay, when I started, the state paid 75 cents on a dollar. I mean, you almost didn't need me to come. It was 25 cents split across 13 towns. And the state was covering the vast majority of the bill. Gradually, with ed reform changes and, and over the years and other factors, the state has made changes, okay? And the state still gives, they're not apologetic in the sense of saying, you don't have a lot new students, yet we're going to give you $10 million in Chapter 70 money. So it's hard to give them a hard time because they've given you 10 million or just under that. And then the regional transportation money. But it is more difficult when the burden falls on the towns, and the towns are limited by Prop 2.5. Yes.
All right, thank you, Michael. Anybody else, comments or questions?
Oh, Milbury gave me a cake, but I just, but I'll just take for a good, best wishes in
I'm
retirement.
going to give you best wishes
What are you going to do with yourself?
enjoy your retirement. right?
Now, it begins with 2 grandchildren, 10 and 7, who play everything, and that's good. So the first thing I need is a new glove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
From one full-time job to another, that's,
yeah.
But thank you. Wish you the best.
Well, we wish you the best.
See you at town meeting.
Yes.
And Anthony, we will see you again.
Most certainly will.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
guys. Appreciate your
Here,
time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your retirement.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your 32 years.
Thank you.
Yes.
I gave the cake to the girls in the office.
Yeah, it wasn't as
Oh, the
good-
staff in the office.
But it
We can always
wasn't as
send
good
you
as the
one
cakes they
before
make
you-
in Valley Tech.
No, it wasn't that elaborate.
Because the cakes, the cookies are the best over there.
Don't forget to send us the referral.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, take care, you guys, thank you. Gene, do we have any reserve fund transfers? Okay. Matt, anything for us? Pie chart, maybe?
Cake chop.
Hi.
cakes and pie, jeez. We're all hungry.
But I've been looking at your spreadsheet, you've got some tentative numbers there, it looks like, right?
Yeah, so to that end, I have a lot to say, but I'll try to be concise. I came into work today and opened up the budget spreadsheet, and after a week of looking at some of the bigger numbers and doing some quality control, catching a mistake that I had made, this morning, the deficit was at $173,768. So through the course of the day, I came up with reductions to the conservation agent spending line, choosing not to hire the facilities manager position, which was approved by the select board and budgeted by town meeting, but not going to fill it. Reducing forestry, the initial, we usually do 10,000 at annual and then another 50,000 at special. I'm going to take it all the way down to 0. Open space requested 16,000 for signage around a conservation piece of property. We removed that from the budget. But I had to restore the trailer rental at Highway because we're not going to get the Highway barn built in time for fiscal '26. I had to add 7 individuals into the health insurance plan who are turning 26 and will be coming off their family's plan. And I had to do some massaging of the finance department's budgets, which is where I had made a mistake. There's no massage there. I had to put that. Last year, we had a transition with Pam Carter retiring, and then we hired into the position, and then we funded both Pam and the new person to get the training done and the transition done. So there was this bump, and then it came down again. Well, when I put in the new position, I didn't carry it forward, so I missed that Deb Tita's position in the budget. So I had to put it back in. But as of now, I've got the budget deficit trimmed down to $61,000. But I'm running out of arrows. And probably the single most important thing that's going to happen, 2 important things will happen over the next 2 weeks. By the end of this week, we should have the structure and cost of our health insurance program established from the brokers. I've baked in 12% for actives and 10% for retirees. Those numbers seem to be quite firm. Where we're going to ease our transition away from the group and into a new setting that we're moving into is by just holding back or encumbering, whatever word you want to use, free cash. So we're going to make sure that our run out of claims has some cash backing here in Douglas. So if there's any disagreement with the group on our exit payment, we will be able to honor our obligations to the run out of claims. And hopefully, when we are out and they pay us our surplus, we will free up that free cash and it'll go back into the capital budget where it belongs. And we will actually not miss a beat. Our stop loss coverage, and we're just going to finish this point because it's important. We have a run out, but we will also be purchasing stop loss insurance with a run-in provision. So we're going to run out and run in. So there'll be some expense associated with that, but we should have all the risk covered for this transition away. The treasurer of the MSHG did certify that as of the end of January, Douglas's surplus on record is $1 million, which is about correct, we think. We had a bad year last year, so that 1.4, 1.6 number I used to throw around that eroded somewhat from a bad claims year. But we feel like we're in a good spot. We feel like they're acknowledging us, that they recognize that they owe us money and intend to pay us. Now, it's not going to happen right away. It probably will be a year before we see that money. But I am encouraged by the recent signals from the group. So that's one important event. The second and most important event is the property and casualty insurance placement that the select board will do. 2 steps. On Tuesday, we will have sort of a back and forth session with our current carrier, which is Maya, the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association, which is a self-funded group of municipalities that pool resources for everything from general liability, workers' comp, IOD coverage for public safety, cybersecurity, management liability, school committee liability. All of these lines are in this one account. And this year, we've budgeted close to $600,000. And that's a really, really high premium. And we feel like we should probably be significantly below that. When we started this conversation with Maya several years ago, we were at $359,000. So we feel like they have some explaining to do. They are the incumbent. They are a creature of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. So we will give them the opportunity to have this preliminary conversation with the select board and answer some of our questions and concerns. We've also have a broker who at this point has really strong interest from no fewer than 5 carriers. So I think we're going to see real intense competition for our business. And I don't want to overly influence anybody, but one of our concerns with Maya has been whether or not our statements of value and other coverage limits and other things are accurate. And it's all well and good until you file a claim, a substantial claim, and you're trying to get them to honor their paper, and they say, well, wait a minute, you have a $40 million loss, but right here, you signed this piece of paper, said it was only worth $30 million. So we're working with the broker to make sure that what is quoted to us reflects the actual values. And when you look at the town's asset base, it is dramatically improved over the last 8 to 10 years. And I was kind of encouraged, just sitting there with the broker going through the age of the roofs and the other major building systems, and most of the dates we were giving were well after the year 2000. They were much more recent numbers. And that's something that a carrier likes to see because it indicates that the town has made a commitment to its capital budget and has been funding building repairs and building maintenance aggressively. And so their risk profile is dropping. So I'm optimistic that whatever deficit I have left, I'm going to cover plus more with a change in property and casualty insurance. However, I don't have a quote in my hand, so I don't have the first idea of what I'm saying is true or not. I just am speculating.
So Matt, if we do make the change, how quickly does that money show up, so to speak? I mean,
Well, it doesn't. It's just,
can you use it in budgeting when we have 6 weeks left to?
so here's what I'm going to do, because I am in a bit of a pickle here with the timing.
Yeah.
I'm going to balance the budget with the full premium that I anticipate Maya would charge us in the budget, so that 609 figure.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And if we get close to the end, before your flyer goes out, before you have your public hearing, and I have a firm quote, because I'm asking the select board to make a decision on April 1st.
Okay.
If I have that firm quote and I can sign the paperwork, then I'll make that change in the budget. And I might restore some of these things.
So when we have our public hearing on April 8th,
It'll
should be good to go.
The ink may still be wet on the paper. It's all in a really tight time frame.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we pushed forward with this, because if we didn't have this opportunity to do this, we would probably be really scrambling, and all these things would be cut, and there'd be no hope of them coming back. So that's where we stand with this budget. I don't anticipate at this point any further difficulties with major accounts not having been fully scrubbed. Just so that everybody fully, I keep cutting you off, but
That's
just so everybody's okay with it or understands this, when you get our budget, what you'll see is that the municipal side is pretty much flat at zero. And that almost every last dollar of new revenue, that's why I'm not showing you a pie chart, because it'd be one big pie. Because like 89 cents of every new dollar coming into the town is going to go to the schools. The other 11% will go into benefit programs, and we do carry schools on the insurance piece and property and casualty insurance. All the schools' premiums are on the town side of the budget, so I'm coming in with a flat town budget, and the school side going up by quite a bit, largely because of BVT and Norfolk Aggie and school bus transportation.
Yeah, what's the latest on Norfolk Aggie, Matt?
So we were able to.
6 or 8? Or?
6. It's 6, not 8. And it may not be all 6, right? And maybe some students will make their decision, and that will help reduce the pressure on the budget if they decline or accept. Any clarity will be helpful. So it wasn't 8. Their letter to us was inaccurate. After we pushed back on it, we got down to 6. 4 freshmen and 2 sophomores.
What's the per kid for Norfolk Aggie? How much? More or less.
What did we end up going up to? It went up quite a bit, so
Yeah.
About 30,000.
29,000 and change
Okay.
without a sped component. So if any of those students require sped, it's like another 7,000 or 8,000. And then without the transportation piece, which we don't have a number on yet. So that's just tuition.
Are you waiting for state numbers on any things in terms of keeping you up at night?
No.
Okay.
So that we had 6 apply at Norfolk Aggie, still waiting for those results. There were 29 students admitted to BVT, more or less, and we have 34 graduating. So our net is down 5, and yet our assessment is up 12.5%. And not to be overly disagreeable, but I give Dr. Fitzpatrick a lot of credit, because he puts the best possible look on what he presents to you. He looks at it from every angle. He's very thorough. And a lot of what he says, you can take to the bank. It is an accomplishment for any organization to compete for and win as many grants as BVT does, and frankly, as the town of Douglas does. It's a cultural value to go out and seek those funds and leverage your operation with other people's money. It's just, you have to do it. I don't know that anybody does it better than Oxford, where they've got ridiculous amounts of grants, but we do very well here too. I would say Oxford and Douglas 1 and 2 in this whole region in terms of being able to leverage grants, but BVT is fantastic at it. But fundamentally, I would encourage members of the Finance Committee to see past all of that presentation and look carefully at this document.
The green sheet?
All of it.
Oh.
Because there are some questions that it was not possible to pre-wire you with, because there just wasn't a lot of time. First of all, the debt piece, almost all the towns excluded the debt pretty much everybody who actually did a thought process excluded the debt. We did it by one vote, but most of the other communities, it was a no-brainer, it was quick. I think Douglas really thought they were voting on the money, not voting on the exclusion. It was only the exclusion. But you see here it counts both as a reduction in revenue and as a reduction of expenses. So it depresses the 7.05 number artificially, and for presentation purposes, only to 5.77%. The actual increase is 7%. Okay?
I was doing some math while you were doing your math, Mike.
So that's really what the number is, and that's why he doesn't hide it. It's right here. That's the actual increase, 7%. And my take his argument, I'm going to flip it on its ear. He says you can't compare his school system to Douglas Public Schools because his school system bears expenses that Douglas Public Schools do not. Fair. But the town of Douglas, as a whole, has far more expenses than BVT does. We have police officers and firefighters, and we carry all the insurance, we carry all the retirement, and I would not dream of coming to town meeting and asking for a 7. It's not, we can't do that without an override, right? So our bounds that we live within are far more constricted than this. And so don't expect me to get all fired up to respect it, because I don't. Because when somebody can come in and present you with an invoice and say, you're going to pay this, it's a completely different dynamic than going to town meeting and tell the voters, oh yeah, your tax bill is going to go up by 7%. So it's a luxury. Our assessment's up 12.5%. When you do a risk assessment of anyone's budget, be careful to look at these revenue streams and look for one-time revenues being used for operational expenses. So by my logic, he took out the 340 because he doesn't have it anymore. So this is a line labeled Other Funding Source, excess PY, Chapter 71. So in the year that we're in, is 340,000. Next year, 0. So he had a $340,000 hole blown in his budget, and he backfilled it with a transfer from excess and deficiency and a, by far, one-time benefit, these pension funds. He did a nice job explaining of how he's going to get those funds in, but they're not a sustainable revenue source. Yeah. So this budget, and I'll say that I'm going to be careful saying this because there are a lot of people that disagree with me, but I think the best practices are on my side. Since I've started here, we have not used free cash or other one-time budget sources for operating budget.
Right.
Because that is a fundamental principle of strong budgeting and fiscal soundness, is to not rely upon one-time revenues for ongoing expenses. It is such a deeply ingrained principle. The one time I used it was to settle a teacher's contract that had so much significant reform in it, it was worth it for the town to make that one-time investment to get the school's budget up to speed so it could absorb that. It was, that's why it was so absurd to think that it was continuing. It wasn't. But here he's got this exposure of $450,000 and a number of operational dynamics that are very low. So when he says, my health insurance is up 4% year over year, Maya is the biggest carrier in Massachusetts municipalities for health insurance programs for employees, and their bands this year started at 9.5, and the highest was 19.5. The town of Sutton is at 19.5. Douglas, even though we're not in Maya, and we've been so strong at managing our exposure to health insurance costs that we were 0 4 years in a row, but next year we're at 12. So if he's at 4, he's waiting for the other shoe to drop, because you cannot escape the impact of trend. So no matter how long he postpones it, at some point, he's overexposed to a future liability because he hasn't been building up this. He's either in a contract and hasn't renegotiated in a while, or his carrier hasn't caught up to him yet. But that 4% is garbage. So he might get it for this year, but next year he's going to get double digits because everybody is.
He's retired.
He's going to retire. The retiree benefit, so some of you picked up on the retiree benefit thing because it's very complex. I will ask this question on your behalf because he needs to answer it. What is your premium co-share breakout for retirees versus actives? So his retirees, I know, are 85-15. 85 district, 15 beneficiary. So I think, don't quote me on it, but I think his actives are 75-25. Teachers don't necessarily retire when they're 65 and go onto a Medicare supplement or Advantage plan. They can't. So they stay on the active plans at the new co-share ratio because they're retired. So if it goes from 25% of the premium to 15, the more people that retire from the BVT teacher cohorts, their cost of the health insurance actually goes up. Even if the premium isn't going up that much, they just added 10% of that premium. Now, what is that premium? Last time I checked, their family plans were $32,000, $33,000. Okay? So, that's one concern. The other concern is I'm not entirely sure how he structured it. It looks to me like he's got a lot of retirees in the GIC. The GIC is a jack-in-the-box. I prefer not to crank because it's a very complicated state program, lots of choice of plans, lots of things you can get. I think he's got others that are outside of the GIC because they left the GIC, I believe, some time ago, and they've been on their own. Retiree health insurance is under tremendous cost pressure, tremendous cost pressure. So we're paying 300-something bucks per member per month. The more recent quotes from the same carrier that we have to another municipality were close to 33% higher than ours. And that's because of a couple of things. Pressure from Washington. Washington, for whatever reason, doesn't like Medicare Advantage. But there's also the rapid increase in some of the forms of care that are coming through the retiree system. People live longer, more expensive. Going back to my previous point, Douglas is 80-20 for actives, but retirees were 50-50. So when somebody retires on an active plan, we see significant savings and they see a significant increase. Our family plans cost about $26,000 a year. So they go from about $4,800 to about $12,000 if they retire on an active plan. So why am I saying all this? Because I think there's significant exposure in this budget. And then the funding is a one-time resource. It's not as strong, but then don't let me overstate the case. It's not that weak either. What's 450 on 32 million?
1.5%.
Yeah. And then transportation at 7% is absurd. Absolutely absurd. So, again, kudos to BVT and the leadership there for holding that, but I'm guessing that's the last year of a contract that's going to be re-upped. Douglas, this year, you'll see it in the budget, it's 23%. And everybody's facing that because they're passing through the expenses of workers' comp, incredible difficulty recruiting and retaining staff to drive the buses, and the cost of the equipment itself. If you haven't tried to buy a big truck lately, go out and try to get one. And just the buses, it's just going to get a whole heck of a lot worse. So
We just did loans to AA Transportation, $1 million a bus.
$1 million a bus. They used to be $350. It wasn't that long ago. So this is what we're looking at. I think there are some real holes in this BVT budget. I think he's leaving them with some work to do. And there's a lot of discussion amongst town administrators and town managers about the weakness of this budget. For our number of students to be going down and for our assessment to be going up at the levels that we're talking about, $250,000, is something that we should, if we're fulfilling our fiduciary duties, we've got to explore it pretty
Is a
aggressive.
simple answer, though, that the state reimbursement is going down and we've got to pony up the difference, or is that too simplistic?
You know, same thing's happening here,
Yeah.
right? So we've been flat. We've been going along with hold harmless on Chapter 70 for years. And I would reiterate our primary commitment is to the Douglas Public Schools. So on a dollar basis, that's our largest increase in the budget, $610,000. As far as I can tell, that's the largest increase in history for the Douglas Public School system coming from the town. But it's barely going to be enough to do the things that we think we need to do to cover the expense structure of the system. So, but none of it, even at the end of the day, after moving almost every dollar of new revenue over to the education side of the budget, we're nowhere near 7%, not even close. So there's a level of discipline that does not occur here that has to occur on our side.
He had said with their teaching expenses that they were it was a 3% increase, and they were in the third year of a 3-year contract. What's the typical increase going forward in teacher contracts as far as annual increases?
So you asked a simple question, and I have a Matt Wojcik economist answer for you. But maybe not the economist, maybe it's the law school education part. The contracts.
Depends on CPI or?
You know, the contracts are much, much more complicated than the COLA. The COLA is actually the frosting on the cake. The cake is all the rest of it. Steps and lanes. So what is the actual rate of increase of a teacher's salary in a district is what people making decisions need to ask and answer, not the COLA. COLA is only one piece. So let's say I'm a step 5 teacher and I have a master's. I go out and I get 15 credit hours of classes, so I move lanes from master's to master's plus 15. But I'm getting a step because I'm step 5. So now I'm getting a lane change and step 6, and then on top of that, I'm getting a COLA. What's my increase? Well, it kind of depends on the chart, right? But it's going to be more like 8%. So 3% is very much in the ballpark of COLA conversations with teacher negotiations all across Massachusetts right now. 3% is really kind of where everybody's at. So it's where a lot of people are with unions. By the way, the town COLA this year is 2. But it's probably more sophisticated than that. If he has a lot of senior teachers, they're probably all at the top step. They may be earning longevity. They may be grabbing another step, one last step, and pretty significant lane changes. It has become more and more difficult. The Economist recently had a nice article about what is the value of a master's degree these days. Because they're like candy. They're just so easy to get. And the superintendent and I cry on each other's shoulder about this because master's for me was 60 credit hours. It was 2.5 years. I'm still paying the bill. And the courses were it was ridiculously hard, and we went to class 6 hours a week.
But with Madeline Albright, though, Matt.
But with Madeline, who was wrong about everything.
More than Condoleezza Rice?
More, yeah.
Okay.
Probably not as wrong
If
as
that's
Kurt.
possible.
But long story short, it was a lot of work and a huge expense, and now it's cutting cheap, right? You go on the University of East Douglas, and, there's 12 assignments, and I can blow out the reading in a few days, a couple weeks, go through the assessments, and if I'm really smart, I have my AI chatbot do it for me, and I get credits towards my master's. So lane changes are a little bit cheaper than they were. And it's a shame because some people really are working very hard to better themselves, and the more educated our teachers are, the better. So I don't want to poo-poo that. I don't want to be disrespectful to that. That's true. But it is possible. Like, within the realm of possibility, it's very definitely possible to get a master's fairly quickly, fairly cheaply, and it devalues the program. But that's a long-winded answer to your question, which is the real answer to the question is, how many teachers do you have? How much did payroll grow? because that's what the engine generated that year, after steps, lanes, and COLA. And our engine is more like 5 or 6% than 3. Yeah.
So Matt, in terms of the warrant, I asked you this 2 weeks ago, but is the select board pretty sure on what will be on the warrant? And any idea when we can get a rough draft of the wording?
And I know Gene and Lisa are working on it right now.
Okay.
I think you've been given most of the previews of everything you're going to see, road acceptances.
We haven't seen a thing yet.
No,
No, but you've had conversations here with, or am I confusing you with the select board?
Select board.
So it'd probably be a good use of time to have Matt Benoit come and talk about the community development articles that will be on the warrant, because that's where a lot of the complexity comes in. You get a stormwater bylaw, you have rewritten sections of the ADU bylaw, which may or may not be on, depending if the Attorney General responds to us. Acceptance of William, Joseph, and Whiten Heights, those are roadways, subdivisions. The one item I anticipate adding in a rush, because I think it's fair, is we have a landowner who does not live in Douglas, lives in Sutton. If you're familiar with North Street, as you approach the Sutton line, after you pass North Village, there's a little dirt road that goes off to the left. And the property, Brown Road, so the property owners have frontage on Brown Road, which is in Douglas. The holdings are in Sutton. The Douglas land is zoned industrial. So under the Douglas zoning codes, you cannot build residential property by passing through industrially zoned property. The industrially zoned property here is about 20 feet wide, which is a travesty. And we have residential zoned land that abuts these lots. So we escape spot zoning, and we give somebody a chance to get their retirement, basically by selling off a couple of house lots next to the home that they own. I think it's only we're here for service, and I don't really think that's the most difficult thing in the world to ask town meeting, can you give this guy a strip of land as a residential zone instead of industrial, so he can make use of what he's paid taxes.
you said you can't access residential land through industrial land. I thought it was the other way around. You can't access industrial land through residential.
No, it's both.
It's both?
The whole idea was to keep those two zones away from each other.
Right.
So you wouldn't have a factory next to somebody who wants to have a house.
But no matter what happens, you're going to have that.
Well, yeah. But in this case,
Yeah,
the abutter is North Village.
right,
So that lot's already, under the terms of the comprehensive permit,
right,
all of that land has been built out to its maximum, right?
right.
So they got the density for the core, but the rest of the lot cannot be developed. That's
Okay.
part of that term. So just to the north of it, you've got Brown Road.
Right.
And these two tiny little triangle strips that all told can't be much more than an 1/18 of an acre. Talking tiny. I think you've heard me say it before, I despise bureaucrats and
Yeah.
bureaucratic reasons to get in the way of people doing things they want to do.
Right.
But if people are going to be sticklers about you can't build a house off an industrially zoned lot, then I'm going to say, well, then let's rezone it. And give them, it's not going to change the rest of the town at all,
Now, is there any way,
because there's already houses there, Carol.
yeah, I know, is there any way while we're doing that we can get access into
Castle.
Castle Caves?
Well, I thought Mr. Sherrier was taking care of us on that, on the other side.
Castle Court.
Oh, no, not Sherrier.
Yeah.
Sherrier's the other way.
Thomas, is it Thomastinus or something like that?
The entity that bought most of the land that you access, no, I'm not wrong, Sherrier still owns that lot on Conservation Drive,
Okay, right.
right?
But Conservation Drive backs up to,
All the way on the way over on the other side.
yeah,
It's town land.
yeah.
There's a big chunk of town land there.
Because I know that like Brown Road I've gone in through Brown Road to Castle Caves, and evidently there is a right to pass. However, it's across, I think, Mr. Slocum's land, and he gets very testy when you're over there.
So there's a little notch there that's
Yeah.
not what I'm talking about.
Okay,
So if you can imagine this big piece of town conservation land
right,
comes up almost to the end of Brown Road.
right,
There's a little notch,
okay,
and that's the gentleman you just mentioned,
Right.
and then the rest is the other
right,
person that I'm referring to.
yeah.
So, but I asked Matt Benoit to craft that warrant article so we could at least have this conversation. I don't really think it's fair to make the guy wait
Right.
too long for it.
Now, one of the things, so we'd like to see is, we'd like to have Matt email all of these things to us before he comes in to see us. So
Yeah.
we've had a chance to read it before he comes in. Because you get a lot of stuff in front of you, and then, we've got an hour or two, and we want to see it ahead of time.
Yeah.
And Gene, when we were talking with Board of Health, there was a warrant article too for the, related to the landfill, right?
Correct.
So when will that wording be ready for us to take a look at, you
We
think?
did ask the consultant to have the wording to us tomorrow.
Okay,
He was not available from March 25th. He will be available for the April 8th.
and can Matt come here on March 25, do you
I
think?
requested that Matt be here on March 25th.
And send us stuff before that meeting?
Hopefully, you'll have the draft warrants before that meeting.
Our
which will
consultant
include
needs it before
language.
then.
What's that?
Our consultant needs it before then.
The thing is, it's already been presented to the select board.
The whole warrant has?
No. But these materials have.
Oh, okay.
So there's no reason for him not to just send it to you tomorrow.
Right, there you
Right?
go.
Whatever the select board saw, it was pretty well developed. You should be able to see it. You don't need to see the Mylars to know where the road's going to be laid out. You just need to see the map. I think you'll be all set.
Okay.
There's a piece of property that is apparently landlocked. It isn't, but I'll get to that in a second. That abuts the Cubes at Gilboa in Uxbridge. It's owned
The
by the
17 acres or whatever?
17 acres owned by the town of Douglas. And some of it's within the buffer for the Mumford River, but most of it is upland, and about 7 or 8 acres are actually probably usable. We're pretty much at the finish line with a potential tenant for the building that we would really like to see there, for a lot of reasons, the biggest being stability. There's some companies ooze stability where others don't. The more likely, the more basic needs they fit for human beings, the more likely they are to stay in business, as long as they're not run into the ground by a corrupt person. So we've got a very, very reputable company that really would like to be there, needs that 7 or 8 acres for additional parking. The only way the town of Douglas benefits is to sell the property because it's in Uxbridge. We're not going to be able to tax anything. Turns out it's not landlocked. It actually has an easement to pass over the golf course to Northeast Maine.
Really?
And the reason why that's important is because the appraiser advised me that as long as there's a way to get to a street, it's industrial property with frontage or access to a roadway. He can value that because he'll find comps. It's very hard to find comps for industrial property that's landlocked.
Yeah.
And very hard to value it because it's worth whatever it is to the existing business that would love to have it, and everybody else thinks it's worthless. So you put it out to auction hoping that their rival doesn't buy it on them just to mess up their plans. And I don't want to sound paranoid, but that used to happen so often in Woonsocket when I was economic development director. Walgreens would find out that CVS had bought a piece of property on a corner, they'd buy the opposite corner, and they would lock each other up, and it was insanity.
Where's the little easement, Matt?
So the little easement, it's not marked on the map, okay? It's in the deed. It's a very broadly drawn easement. It's the right to pass and repass over the entire remainder of the Aldrich property, and Seti Aldrich was the one who donated it to the town. So it really could be anywhere, right? The Select Board has to declare that property not useful for municipal purposes. Then it goes to town meeting for authorization. Town meeting must be involved when there's an interest in real property. In this case, it would be the sale of the land to the potential buyer/tenant
When does the warrant close?
in about a week and a half.
Okay.
So I'll be putting that on there. First of all, we need the revenue, so it wouldn't hurt. But more importantly, is because we'd like to lock in the tenant, and if they go forward, they want to be fully operational by December, which is a very compressed time frame.
Is there any wind of any citizen warrant articles, citizen petitions, or anything like that? Or is it all pretty much from Matt Benoit and?
I think by now, if there was a citizen's petition, they'd be hard pressed to get signatures and get it in.
Okay.
I haven't heard of any.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Do solar farms make money?
Good question. I wish I knew. I can tell you the people who buy interests in them are not the kind of people who are accustomed to losing money.
Right. So if
So Goldman Sachs and others are,
So if we own land somewhere, would it be in our interest to investigate the placement of solar farm that we would own that could generate electricity for us to utilize, seeing we own the land?
I have an ally in my quest. I started talking about this a year ago.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna enlist your support even further. What if it wasn't but panels that age and go away? What if there were batteries to store energy
Right.
and then sell power overnight or during high demand peak
Exactly.
periods and purchase it when it's low?
Right.
That's not a crazy idea, right?
It's not a crazy idea at all.
So the 17 acres here in Uxbridge is not a good fit for that, because there's the grades, there's access, and where do I connect to three-phase from there, right? It's just kind of an expense to get to three-phase from there. But we have other properties that already have three-phase.
But isn't it near like yeah, I guess that would be a little far
You
away.
have to cross the river.
Right.
The river and through the woods, right?
But we have other places where we don't have to do that. We just have to go to our existing transformer sitting on a pad on a piece of property we own.
I'm curious about this company needs parking. Do they need parking for employees, or is it parking for something else?
Trucks.
For trucks?
The downside of warehouse distribution facilities is the traffic they generate. The upside would be two things, right? They're close to the highway, which is why they want it. So hopefully they wouldn't be running up 16. And secondly, if they run up 16, we have a development agreement with the developer at Cubes of Gilboa to improve all the roads and intersections in that area
Okay.
if the traffic study triggers a signalization. They're going to pay for it. So that's kind of how we locked in, try to protect the town.
All right, anything else for Matt? Will you be here on the 25th? Will you be around?
If you read
The only
the
thing
statute,
on our-
I have to come to your meetings unless I have a bronchial infection or something horrible. I have to be here.
Because Gene,
But it's my pleasure to be here.
all we have scheduled for the 25th is to go over the warrant articles. And Matt Benoit will be presenting those warrant articles.
Yeah, but I think you were also, in terms of my update to you, I'll have all this insurance information pretty much at least proposed. The health piece will be done, the property and casualty will be proposal.
Okay.
And we can at least see where it puts us for a budget.
You will also probably have capital.
Yep.
It may be small, but you still have the capital.
Oh, okay. So,
On the 25th?
so should we plan on somebody from Capital being here to go over the capital budget then, on the 25th? Okay. All right, okay, so no more questions for Matt? All right, Matt, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, so we're just looking at the schedule, everybody. So March 25, we're going to focus on the warrant. Hope we have all the wording here, and then capital. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then April 8 is the public hearing in which we will go through the warrant articles and vote to recommend or not recommend for each one. No meeting on April 22. And then we meet May 5 a little bit before, probably 6:30. So any questions on upcoming schedule? Anyone? Did I miss anything, Gene? Okay. We have no meeting minutes to approve. Anybody have anything else? All right, motion to adjourn. Sandy moves, we adjourn at 8:49. Lynn seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, abstained, motion carries unanimously. We adjourn at 8:50.